Do for kind of the last part of the class here is we're going to talk about some more of the biology. Have we actually been talking at all about cognitive neuroscience in these three classes? Or has this all been cognitive psychology? This has been very cognitive. In the last class we will explore kind of much more. We'll get really micro-oriented. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Chapter 9 and highlight some pages from that for you. Starting on, it looks like maybe the first page. You can write this down for your notes, and thank you for volunteering your book for me. Page 381. There's a very important chart there. It talks about memory systems. And as far as using your book for one of the references, I don't know. I guess I could do that. It could be one of your 5 references if you want to make it one of the 5 references. But they talk about short-term memory and long-term memory. In long-term memory, many times we talk about episodic versus semantic memory. Are you guys familiar with the difference between episodic and semantic? I think I brought up this idea in the last class. When I was teaching at Virginia Tech last week, I asked a question, and 2 people in the corner raised their hand at the same time. Do you guys remember me telling you this story? Say again?
You remembered of one of your classes.
From 10th grade, and I actually called my friend, and he remembered it as well. Would that be episodic memory, or would that be semantic memory? Say again? Wouldn't be semantic. Semantic is general memory. That would be very episodic, things personal to you. Semantic memory is what we many times test in class experiments. An animal is a robin, or a robin is a bird. General knowledge that we all have. We believe there are laws that dictate what happens there, and we can measure semantic memory. So they talk on 381 about encoding. What is encoding? Did you do some encoding for our little study? Was there some encoding going on? What is encoding?
It's how your brain stores memory.
It's how it comes in. You encode. It's kind of the input stage. You store it, central processing, and then retrieval. Short-term memory, we talked about the differences between short and long-term. Long-term memory, many times it's all in there, but it's just hard to get it out. Short-term, we talked about some of the differences between the two. Going to 381 and 2, they talk about this case of HM, which we'll talk more about next time, where parts of his frontal lobe was removed and he had some memory problems. They talk about amnesia. We talked about interference. What kind of interferences did we talk about last time? If you're not able to remember things, remember that serial position experiment? Or are people usually the weakest in the serial position experiment? In the middle. Why is that? What kind of interference is going on in the middle of the list? Yeah, you're trying to consolidate things in the beginning of the list. Consolidate into what? From short-term to long-term memory. You're trying to do that, and then you're trying to get stuff at the end. What are the 2 types of interferences we talk about? Kind of did 2 different experiments. I tried to remember a Hamlet soliloquy for you. I was able to recall most of that. It wasn't subject to what? Well, the Hamlet thing was more no retroactive. Retroactive interference is where new information interferes with your ability to remember old information. Proactive was more the demonstration I did with one of you on the categories, and then we changed the categories. Who did I do that to? I did that to somebody. I don't remember. It was the 3 occupations, then peach, grape. Who did we do that to? It was Madison. So that was proactive interference, and then if you change categories, you get a release of that, so you'll need to know that. If we continue on with the pages here, On page 384, they talk about short-term and long-term memory. Actually, on the bottom of 385, they have the Atkinson and Schifrin model of memory. So that would be good to know, and you can even use this as one of your citations, this book and chapter. Another term for short-term memory is now called working memory. They talk about the codes that we have in there in working memory, the phonological. We talked about the visual imagery code. On page 390, it talks about procedural memory. Does anybody know what procedural memory is? If you ask me to put together a gun, how would I be at that task? How do you think I would be at that task?
Have you ever put together a gun?
I've never even held a gun.
All right, then you might not be great at it.
So my procedural memory for how to do that task might be very weak. Do people know people who have guns, and does it take some work to put a gun together? So if you have good knowledge on how to do a particular task, that's called procedural memory. That's mentioned on the bottom of, 390. If I take this acoustic recording, do I have a way of actually taking this acoustic recording and making YouTube videos of it and then uploading that for the online class to hear? Do you think there are probably 10 steps involved in that process? Yes? Do you think I'd go through them pretty quickly? Yeah, it's automatic for me, so that's procedural memory of how to do something. So let's see, what else have we got here? That's good enough there. They talk some about amnesia. We're not going to go into that here. What we are going to go into in the next class, we're going to talk about a key brain structure. Does anybody know what the key brain structure is? From memory? It is the hippocampus. So we're going to talk at the next class about the hippocampus, page 415 and 417. Make sure you bring your books to that particular class because we're going to talk about something called long-term potentiation and its effect on memory. So that's kind of the book information. So let's kind of go back a little bit more. Today we talked about eyewitness memory and testimony, and kind of you'll need to know the method, the results, and the implications. You'll probably get a case, be asked about it, and what kind of implications it might have. Last class we talked a lot about proactive and retroactive interference. That'll be used for your paper, but there will also be a test question on that. The first class was on what? We did the experiment. That was Bauer's study on how to improve memory. What do we know about how to improve memory from Bauer's study? That if the information is what? Organized, recall will be a lot better than if it's random information. So we know that. So you'll probably have a question on that. And then the next class will be kind of, make sure you're here on time. We're going to be talking about the cellular basis of learning and memory. So it'll be very much not just we did a CAT scan of this area of the brain, but we'll actually be going into something called, and has anybody ever heard of it, long-term potentiation? We're going to be talking about some very micro-oriented things there that will hopefully make some sense. So please bring the outline there with you, and I think that will cover it. Let me pass back the book. Desha, thank you for volunteering that. Bring your book to the next class. We'll review. And if you have drafts of your papers to send me, feel free to get it done.